Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the EducatedCollins Snap channel. How you doing? So
I am
today
great,
we
thank you,
will be
brother.
covering surprise cards. So I kind of glanced over it in my tips and tricks videos for 400, but I finally got to it. Now we're going to be going over surprise cards, what they are, what they're used for, why you should have them, and then the types of surprise cards and just some other things relating to it. So you should be used to these by now. Let's get into it. So first things first, what are surprise cards? I would say surprise cards are cards that usually are unexpected to your opponent and can turn around a losing game. So these cards, when played, you should be like, oh, I forgot about this, or I didn't realize he could do this. And a game that your opponent thought they were ahead, these cards can turn the game around and make you the winner. So that's essentially what they do and why they're so good. So surprise cards are one of the best ways to gain 8 cube wins off of opponents. So the reason this is the case is because usually how people work, how humans kind of play this game, is they will not really want to risk things, right? If they are behind, they're going to leave. So essentially, you have to bait them into a situation where they think they're ahead, but because you have cards of these qualities in your hand, you let them overextend, let them snap into you, whatever, and then turn 6, you play these surprise cards. They go, wow, I forgot about this, or wow, I didn't realize, oh, he could do this, and you actually get the 8 cubes. So these are definitely one of the best ways to get 8 cubes, because usually if you're like dominating a game, people are not going to stay, people are going to leave. So it's only when a game is close, it's only when you can turn a game around is when you can actually get them to continue playing the game, get them to finish the game out, and take those 8 cubes. So.
And yes, Aero is like that, Raptor. And yes, I saw that answer by them that they said that Aero was on the watch list. Well, they didn't state it, but they implied it by putting the ice emote, you know. I watched that. And yes, it should be on the watch list because Aero is really powerful. And it is one of these surprise cards. You know what card is a surprise card that I want to make it work and I like a lot? Valkyrie, brother. Valkyrie is a surprise card for the last turn that takes down the power of the enemy, and it can help you out a lot, but it is not an easy card to pull off, but it is a surprise card for sure.
Very useful type of card to have. So this is kind of explained. Most people usually stay in the game if they have a powerful game plan, and surprise cards can turn those game plans into weaknesses. So let's say, you know, they want to summon big things. Well, if you have a Shang-Chi, bam, you can just blow them out. If they want to flood the board or summon tons of big powerful cards on the last turn, well, an arrow, right, could put it all in one lane so they can't really contest. If they want to, you know, play a magic or something, you can like change the location and, oh, well, now they couldn't do their setup. So there's a ton of ways where players could be setting up for a powerful game plan, but you can use a surprise card to turn those game plans into weaknesses and take big wins off of them. So one core concept is that every card can be or become.
Wow, I didn't expect that at all.
Oh, they have to destroy a card. They have to, you know, do something special. Every card can be a surprise card. Surprise cards are just.
But yes, there are cards. We were right now talking about tech cards like Aero and Shang-Chi and Valkyrie in my case. But there are cards that are not tech cards that are surprising. For example, a lot of people have won to me surprisingly with a Doctor Doom that I didn't expect. You know, Doctor Doom is a surprise card for sure, or something like that.
Cards that your opponent doesn't expect, right? Where it makes your opponent like, oh, I didn't realize they would play this or they're running this. They don't
surprise sign that, yes, brother.
Your opponent's not really expecting that card. That's essentially a surprise card. Now, that doesn't mean that every card has the same properties of surprise. Like a Scarlet Witch can do a lot more than like a zero or you know, something that just gives stats, right? There are different levels of surprise cards, but I wouldn't say, oh, this card doesn't do anything special, it's not a surprise card. As long as your opponent's caught off guard and it can change a game around, that can be a surprise card. We're definitely gonna go over types of surprise cards later down the road, but it should be said that just because it doesn't fit any noticeable box, it doesn't mean it's not a surprise card. As long as you're catching people off guard, that's the whole purpose of a surprise card. It's not like, oh, it has to be this or that. So in that same vein, a card that is traditionally thought of being a surprise card can actually stop being one if it becomes meta, if it becomes expected.
Oh,
right?
this
like
is true. Completely.
Common card is Shang-Chi, right? If you know the deck list.
For example, like, now that you talk about the leader, Mike Wisa, the leader wasn't a surprise card when he was at the height of the leader meta, you know, because everybody was playing the leader. At the start, it was a surprise because you didn't expect a leader, and it completely destroyed you. But after some time, everybody was playing the leader, so it wasn't a surprise. You just had to play it around him, and that was boring. But you knew that everyone was playing the leader.
Like, oh, they could be playing Shang-Chi. That means that card has really lost its surprise value. It's now more of just a tool that everyone's aware of. So now you're like, well, if he Shang-Chi's me, at least I can do this to counteract the Shang-Chi. Oh, it's 3 power here. At least I can just play a 4 power card. So even if he Shang-Chi's me, well, I still have this 4 power to deal with it. So cards that become meta, become commonplace, cards you logically think about commonly when you're playing a game. If that is happening, that card has really lost its value of that surprise mechanic. So if you think in your games, oh, they could have this or that or whatever, well, those cards you're thinking of are not surprising well because it's a common thought that you could have. So Arrow, Leader when it was very popular, Shang-Chi, Enchantress, all those cards at the highest levels really stop being surprise cards.
Brother, yes, because why the fuck do they have a leader in a Patriot deck, brother? They had leader in every deck, brother. That surprised me, of course. I didn't expect that leader in there.
And just tools that people play around. So that's something you have to grasp. You can't just say, oh, this is always going to be my surprise card. A meta can change, player bases can change, things like that. And it doesn't always mean that a card that maybe last season was a surprise card, this season could just be a common tool that people are playing around. Now, got a question for you guys. What is the worst type of deck list? So, pause for a little bit. Just think about it for yourself. And
if we are talking about surprise cards, I believe he's going to say that the worst type of deck list is the one that is predictable. But there are a lot of decks right now that are predictable that still are good. For example, the Shuri deck that I used to climb to infinite, everybody knows what the deck does, and it is still a good deck. The Galactus deck, it is a very telegraphed deck. It is really predictable, and you see it coming from a mile away. But apparently, it still ranks up in the ladder. So I don't know if that is, but what is the worst type of deck list? It is not that one. The one that doesn't get you cubes, that doesn't push enough power. I don't know. Let's see what he says.
Try to figure out, with this concept, what would be a really bad deck list to play? Now, the answer I have for you guys is a predictable and popular
yes, he said.
So just being predictable isn't actually that bad if it's a niche deck list, right? If it's a deck list people aren't playing, then that predictability doesn't really affect too many of your games because people won't really know what is he running. Like if every time your game plan is so I play this card on 4, and I always play this card on 5, and I always play this card on 6, right? That makes a deck very predictable. So when a deck is both predictable and popular, then when you play that deck list, they're like, well, he's going to play this card on 4. He's going to play this card on 5. He's going to play this card on 6. And even if the deck list is strong, the problem is that they know how the game is going to turn out. So they can always decide whether to stay or to leave. So that means if they're staying, you should be scared. And if they're leaving, well, you're not getting that much reward from playing that deck list. So every time you're building a deck or you're thinking about deck design, are these cards popular? Are these cards predictable? Is my game plan predictable?
Well, the people are idiots, brother, because I climbed a lot. Like I played Shuri on 4, and then I played Red Skull on 5, and I had or Arnim-Zola or Taskmaster to copy the 30 power Red Skull, and people just stuck around to see what happens, brother. And of course, I slap another 30 points Red Skull on the board, brother. So I don't know. Are people idiots? Probably. Maybe. I am one too.
Or will my opponent know exactly what I'm trying to do every game that I play this? And if the answer is yes, then you have to really evaluate whether this is the type of deck you want to be using, especially for climbing. Tournament play is a little different beast, but we're not going into that for now. So generally for climbing, for ladder, if a deck is predictable, you always do the same things on the same turns, that's pretty bad. And it's only bad if it's popular, if people know what you're doing. So you could run a very random list that no one runs, but you do the same thing every time because no one actually knows what you're doing. It can be super effective, at least for while it's still niche. But as soon as someone picks it up, a streamer plays it, blah blah blah, then boom, like all that power is lost. So you really have to be careful with that. So because of that, neck deck builds and complete meta lists are notoriously bad for having surprise factors because any net deck build is going to be super popular, super common. Any meta list builds are also going to be super common. People are going to know exactly what cards you're playing, right? They're going to know exactly your game plan. They're going to have seen that deck hundreds of times. So it's going to be hard to
That is true.
To put anything or showcase any plays that they won't expect because it's so common.
In fact, that is one of the advices I give people if they want to climb in the ladder. Try to know what decks are meta and to know what cards are in there. So if you see a player playing 3 or 4 cards of one of those decks, you know what deck they are playing and you know what you can expect from them. That is an advice that I give to people to climb. So it is completely true what he's saying here, you know, because you know what they can do against you and what can beat you and what can't beat you.
Because it's so ever present. You're never going to play a card and they go like, wow, I forgot he could play that. Like they've seen it 20 times that day. So anytime you're wanting to have this advantage, it's always cool to try to, at least at the beginning of the season, build your own decks or take a deck and then change it a little bit just to add that wrinkle of like, oh, this isn't exactly the complete list I thought they were running. He actually has
I do that a lot. I have told to you guys, guys know that I am transparent, and I have said to you, I suck at deck building, brother. I suck at deck building. So I I neck deck. I look decks that are good, strategies that other people have designed, but then I adapt them to my play style with a couple of changes. I maybe change 1, 2, or 3 cards in a deck without changing the overall strategy, you know.
It's a different card than is normally in these types of decks. So even doing something small like changing one card out for a different card can definitely have such a powerful effect in how what people are confident into staying into, right? So let's say you just change a card and you put like a Doctor Doom. That doesn't really make sense. Well, they're like, okay, well he can't do this, he can't do that. But then you play the Doom and you're like, oh wait, that I didn't think he could play that card. Oh, now he can actually hit this location that normally they can't hit. Blah blah blah, and you can really get these 8 cube wins.
And that is with the. That goes with what we talk about, my wizard. I wasn't expecting a leader in a Patriot deck. Why? Because the Patriot deck had the cards that I was expecting in there, and there wasn't a leader in there, but they surprised me with the leader. That is what he's saying in here.
Because you have something different than the standard. Because people are always like, oh, he played this, he played a Mortius. He must be playing discard, full discard. Like they have the whole list in their head. And if you change it up, well, that's how you surprise people. That's how you throw them off guard. Now, meta changes and popularities can change how a card is perceived. So basically, a card that could be a very powerful tool early in the season can slowly become less powerful, less effective since it becomes more popular. It becomes more of the meta, and people now react to the card appropriately. They're not getting caught off guard because you're playing this card. They're now like, oh yeah, this card, that's a meta card. So just because you had a great idea like 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago or even a week ago, doesn't mean it's always going to be great, right? You have to change. You have to adapt to how players respond to your cards, to your game plan. So really understanding the ability of climb is taking advantage of those moments of gaps in knowledge where you have a strategy that they don't expect, but then as soon as they start expecting that strategy, you change up your strategy, you change up your plays, you add a different surprise card, and just keep people on their toes, because it's always going to be a fight of like meta and counter and anti-meta, right? So the meta is going to like dominate, and then something you can do is just run cards to deal with the meta. But if people continuously run that counter meta becomes the meta, and now you have to be like, okay, everyone's running this annoying list. How do I make that list work for me? So something very happens.
And that's exactly how the Lich leader meta became prevalent, because everybody was playing Death Wave, and people trying to counter Death Wave came up with the Lich leader deck. And that deck became the meta, and that's when we hated the game, because that wasn't fun. But that's how that deck came into life, brother.
People are playing Leech and Leader, right? So people are losing to that, and then that became the standard game plan. And people are like, okay, how do I make Leech and Leader work for me? Oh, let me put Infinite. Let me put cards that Leader doesn't work well with. Let me play Destroyer. Just if they play that Leader into my Destroyer, I'm killing them.
He used exactly the same example, brother.
That kind of thing, right? And that became like the new tool to deal with the meta, but that was a response to the counter meta that was created because people were playing that to deal with the previous meta. So you always have to be changing, you always have to be evolving. It's not like, this is my deck for the year, I'm just playing that nonstop. That can work, right? Depending on the deck, depending on how powerful it is. That can be very useful or efficient in very busted metas where there's this like super powerful card. But in healthy metas, usually a meta will happen and then the counter meta will appear, and then the counter meta to the counter meta will appear, and it keeps like overflowing as you try to find cool ways to one up or make an efficient counter to the previous week or day's meta. So you really want to have one or more surprise cards in every deck, just because it's one of the core ways to climb quickly. It's one of the core ways to get tons of cubes off of people. Just throwing people for a loop, playing a card they're not expecting in your deck, and just like being like, oh, that Omega Red was really good here, right? Like that kind of thing. Those are really how you get people to stay in, because they don't know they don't expect you to do these type of plays, and that can catch them off guard, get you those wins, and really help you climb. So definitely, I personally recommend that you run one or more. It's sometimes hard to run like tons of them because you do need like a core deck build that is strong and powerful, but having those twists can really be the difference maker. All right, now we're going to go over some types of surprise cards. There's different things that surprise cards like to do, different themes that they gravitate towards.
This that he has in the screen is really important. Always consider snapping before playing a surprise card. And even before revealing your strategy, even before revealing what you are trying to do, you should be snapping, because once they realize what you are doing and that you probably are going to pull your combo off, or you are going to surprise them or destroy them, they are out. So you have to snap before that, so you at least get the 1 extra cube for the retreat,
But another thing is you always want to consider snapping before playing a surprise card. So this is just like it's not like something you have to do, but it's something I think is helpful to think about. Anytime you have like your surprise card in your hand and you want to play it, just consider, should I snap here? Can this change the flow of a match, right? If he gets caught off guard, if your Chang-Chi goes off, if you get to play your big minion, if your Jubilee hits an Infinite, right? Would you have wanted to snap before that action happens? So it's always a good idea to consider snapping before you play your surprise card, just so that you get an advantage from playing it. So the first type of surprise cards are cheap stats. So these are just cards that you can play for cheap. Death, She-Hulk, Miles Morales stature when it comes out. Quinjet. So these cards
Brother, some days ago, a dude dropped on me this bullshit. Check it out. That was a surprise for sure. And I know that this combo exists, and it still was a surprise. They played Munger on turn 4. Then on turn 5, they didn't play anything. Then in turn 6, they dropped, check this out, an Infinite, 20 points. A She-Hulk, 10 more points. And another She-Hulk, 10 more points. 40 points in the last turn, just like that. Because they copied the She-Hulk with the Munger. So they played Munger, they skipped, and on the last turn, Infinite She-Hulk, She-Hulk. That was surprising, brother. That was really surprising. I didn't expect that at all, and it was a lot of power, dude.
These cards are either played very cheaply if done correctly, or can make other cards very cheap. So it's just a good tool, something to think about. We're not going to go over every single card, but these are just the types of them. Next one, you have unexpected stats. So these aren't cheap stats, but these are stats where you're like, you have these ideas of breakpoints in your head, like, oh, turn 6, he can play Magneto, that's 12 power. And then they play a Giganto on you instead, and you're like, oh, right, he can actually play 14 here, so actually lose by 2 or 1 or whatever instead of the 12 you were thinking. Same thing with like M'Baku, same thing like Titania, it's 1 power for 5. Turn 6, you can play that, and that can like really throw people off guard. You do something like Arrow plus Titania, you get 5 in the lane, and you move all the other cards. So things like that. Infinite kind of like on the line of surprise.
Yo, Cosmic Beer, my dude, how you doing, brother?
Right, so that one's a little bit less of a surprise, but you could pull this out from maybe a Jubilee or a Lockjaw or something, and that could be unexpected. And speaking of those cards, those type of cards, we have the RNG Positive Stats. So these are cards that are RNG in nature, but usually your deck is skewed for these cards to be positive, right? So even though, oh yeah, you could hit your Wasp or whatever, normally if you look at the odds, every time you play this card, you should have a positive outcome in RNG. So these are a surprise card. Once again, you don't even know what you're gonna get. But since
I have never seen anyone snap before playing Jubilee. Oh, I have seen it, but sometimes it backfires, you know, and they bring something stupid. Thinking about buying the Mac Tyrant with my tokens. Oh, I would go for it, brother. I would go for it. He is never going to downgrade. He's really strong right now. People say that he's fun. I will do it. I don't do it because I want to find him in a box. We all know that. I will find my Mac Tyrant in a reserve. But for you, I would advise you to get him. Get him, brother. Get him. Especially since I got Chana from a reserve. Oh, brother. So you finally found a Series 5 card and it was fucking Chana. Oh, dude. Rest in peace, my brother. Rest in peace, dude. Guys, I am going to say you something, and I don't know what you guys think about it, but I hate this about this website. They pasted a snap.fan in every card in this website. And why do they do that if this card isn't their artwork, brother? This is the artwork of Marvel Snap. Why are they watermarking an art that is not from them, brother? And if you go to Marvel Snap song, they didn't watermark their cards, so that is where I prefer to get my images, you know. I hate that they watermarked these cards, and they aren't their cards. What do you guys think about it? And I am just being an asshole, probably. I don't know. But I hate that is in there, and it ruins the aesthetic of the card, you know.
The deck is tuned for these cards to be positive for you. They end up being a good card. Normally they play to catch people off guard, things like that. Next up, we have card generation. Card generation makes a ton of sense why it's a surprise card. You don't even know what you're going to get, so they don't know what you're going to get, and you can really just catch people off guard playing like random Valkyries out of nowhere, playing like a Shang-Chi.
You know what is the worst thing here? The cable, brother. They have drawn my key card from my deck, and they destroy me with my own card, and that hurts. Because with White Queen, you know what card they got. In the moment they play White Queen, the highest card on your hand, you know that they have it. So you can have that in the back of your head. But with cable, that is completely impossible to know.
Nowhere a Dino in a non-Dino deck, but you have a full hand. These kinds of things. So just a good way of surprising people if you generate cards that you don't have in your deck. Next up, we have the location changers. These ones are really powerful because you can turn a bad location to a good location. You can close down a location. You can extend the game. You can swap them, right? So these ones do a lot of work. They're pretty obvious in how they can be powerful, how they can be surprised, and it's really up to you which ones you like the most. As you guys know, I'm a Scarlet Witch fan, but I think Storm and Magic and the others really do a very similar job.
My favorite for these ones is Storm. I like Storm a lot, and one of the most surprising things that you can do in the game is a Storm or a Scarlet Witch on the last turn, a limbo location from Magic, or a limbo that just is there spontaneously that just came out from the game itself, you know, not necessarily from Magic. They are expecting a 7th turn, and you just cut out the game right there on the 6th turn with a Storm or a Scarlet Witch. That is really surprising, brother.
Next up, we have card movement. So these cards move other cards on either your board or your opponent's board. So arrows like a
brother, there is a Juggernaut. You guys know that I love Juggernaut, and Juggernaut is really surprising on the last turn. I have won a lot of games by moving stuff with Juggernaut, brother.
Premium card, one of the best cards in the game, because you can move all the opponent's cards into one lane, lock that down. Magneto, same thing. You can move a ton of their cards into one lane. Heimdall is also really powerful because, they think you're fighting for one lane. Oh, no, you're actually fighting for the other 2 lanes, and it can really catch you off guard if they think, oh, I could play nothing there because they're not really contesting it. And Juggernaut, a nice, powerful card where you can just play like Storm and then Juggernaut right afterwards, and if they can't really affect that, you get a free lane. So really powerful, being able to move cards, yours or your opponent's. Hand disruption, annoy your opponent in the hand, right? Before they even get to play their card, you can mess with them. You know, discard them, blackload, silence them.
Brother, I hate the Leech. The Leech always destroys my combos. I hate it. And Dr. Octopus, I hate it. You know why? Because when I play Dr. Octopus, I always lose the lane because I drop down a strong stuff from them. But when they play Dr. Octopus against me, I always drop the worst fucking bullshit and I lose the lane. It is insane, brother, how this card can work wonders for everyone else, but for me it is useless, brother.
Stop them from drawing and or pulling them down into the game. So this can be a really powerful way of surprising people if they're thinking, oh, I have this card that will win me the game, and you just say, no, that card doesn't do anything, or that card's already on the board, I'm discarding it, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, really, really powerful tool. Next up, with hand disruption, we have lane disruption. So cards like Debris.
Here we have the best card in the game, boys. Here you have it, the Green Goblin. And by the way, yesterday was Green Goblin Day with the throne room hot location, so people had to put some respect on my boy's name, brother. The Green Goblin, dude.
Green Goblin, Hobgoblin, Viper. These cards can be really powerful because you just stop your opponent from activating the combos they want to do with the space that provided. So this can be really cool into things like Space Throne. I've definitely Debris into a Space Throne, and then they have a rock there and they can't do nothing, but I have ways to buff that rock so it doesn't actually affect me that much. So things like that can be really powerful. So just taking advantage. There's whole decks built around this type of mechanic, so it definitely has its place in the metagame, and this definitely can be a powerful tool that you can use to mess with your opponent. I will say a lot of these surprise cards are annoying, right? Like, they are annoying, but they're annoying because they're effective. They're annoying because they create that feeling of like, oh, if he didn't have that one card, I would have got him, right? And that's
exactly
really how you get those AQs, right? Because they're overconfident. They think that you have nothing to deal with their situation, but you can play these cards, turn the game around, surprise them, and get them really considering all the different avenues that players can deal with these unusual situations or very powerful board states. Let me get some water real quick. Next up, we have trap cards. So this one
is a Valkyrie, brother. That is a Valkyrie.
Another video in itself, but these are essentially just cards that absolutely shut down an opponent's win condition. So usually they'll have there's like a telegraph game plan, like I'm playing all these ongoings, or I'm playing all these huge minions, or whatever, etc., etc. You know, Shang-Chi can be a trap card, and then you play this one card and it completely shuts down their whole game plan. You blow it up, you erase their effects, you steal their effects, blah blah blah, and their huge game plan, their huge play, you turn that around, you turn it into a weakness. So these cards can be very game changing, very strong, and definitely a lot of decks are built with a couple of these in their main slots.
I have still to see a good outcome from a Super Scroll, brother. I don't remember, maybe I did, but I don't remember losing to a Super Scroll. You know, maybe it is because I don't play a lot of ongoing cards, but I have yet to see a Super Scroll play to its full potential, you know.
You know, Enchantress is a common card, Shang-Chi is a common card, even Cosmo, right, can be a trap card in the right situation. So these cards just do a lot of work and can really turn the tide of a match. Next up, we have Destruction cards. So these are cards that blow up other cards. Very strong, very powerful, obviously. Killing cards from your
brother, I have thought about playing Electra in certain decks because Sunspot is everywhere now. Sunspot is in almost every deck because he's a really good one drop. You can place a Sunspot in almost every deck. That way you aren't afraid of skipping a turn because you aren't completely wasting your energy because Sunspot is getting it, and sometimes you don't have a way of dealing with a big Sunspot, and he can provide big energy some games. There are even some games where you have to think about what if they just don't play anything and let the Sunspot grow, you know? So Electra can be a good tech card about the Sunspot. I have thought about this a lot. I don't know if it is really good, but we'll have to see.
opponent can really mess with them, mess with their game plan, and they're pretty clear cut on how good they are.
Yo, Forest Slow, brother, my dude. And yes, I am the bad legend, brother. You are completely right, my dude. As a Mr. Negative Enjoyer, I do not want to see Super Score rise up. Because he can get all your ongoings, brother.
How they can turn the game around. Next up, we have Lockdown. So Lockdown is just shutting down your opponent's game plan, not letting them do what they want to do. So Professor X, Spider-Man, you just lock down their lane. Sandman could be a nice lockdown card because they only get to play one card if they want to flood. Cosmo can
I
be
like
really
Sandman a
annoying
lot,
if you like
bro.
mess lockdown one lane, Cosmo the other. Well, they can't play any of their on reveals anymore, and that can be really powerful. So that's pretty cool. Then Goose just prevents these 4, 5, 6 high cost cards from being played. So that can also just mess with people's flows, mess with people's game plans. So definitely really nice type of surprise and really can just shut down an opponent's game plan completely. Now, if we have Lockdown, we have Access, Lockdown Access, right? So even though a location may be flooded, right? You could still get to it with some of these cards. Marvel,
exactly.
Heimdall again, Mr. Fantastic. Just being able to say, okay,
Sanctum
yeah,
Sanctorum and stuff like that.
I can't influence that lane completely. I can still do a little bit of work. So these are just nice countermeasure tools to mess with the opponent's game plan of locking you down. Next up, we have the Power Buffer. So these cards just buff up cards. They're not too complicated. They just kind of say, okay, you think that I have this much power here. Well, now I go Killmonger Nova. I have significantly more power here. I go Spectrum, or I go Blue Marvel, or I go Luke Cage, even with Hazmat, things like that, and I just mess with the power that you were expecting to be on those lanes. So they can be a nice surprise in the right tools. Usually, sometimes power buffers are just played down willy nilly, but you can actually use them as a finisher to like sneak extra power that your opponent's not expecting. And then, last but not least, at least for now, we have the full lane influence. So these are cards that can influence lanes that are already full.
Brother, I like Claw a lot, and I believe Claw is undervalued, underappreciated. I have won games with Claw on the last turn because they don't expect 6 extra power on a lane where I have already a full lane or something like that, And yes, Claw is really good. I like Claw a lot.
So they're kind of...
Yo, brother, Broken Draco, thank you very much, brother, for gifting the sub, dude. You are fucking awesome, my dude. Yo, Raptor, congratulations for your sub, brother, from Broken Draco, dude. Thank you very much, Draco, dude. Oh! Thank you very much, brother. Yo, Snowman, my dude, how are you doing, brother?
Kind of like a subset of power buffing, but they just increase the number of lanes that
There you go with the emotes, brother.
may be already full. They don't always have to be full, but they're really good at messing with someone who's like, well, he only has this much power here, but then you claw them and you're like, oh man, they got the 6 power that I wasn't expecting. Now they win that lane, and now
Yo, Snowman with the beats, brother. Thank you very much, my dude. Thank you very much. I have to research what are beats, brother. I am sorry, I have to do that, but I am lazy, my dude. I am lazy.
Since they win that lane, I wasn't really contesting that other lane because I thought, okay, I win that for sure. I just have to contest the mid lane. So they can just catch people off guard. I really think Claw is, especially Pool 2, one of the best tools for doing something like that. And there's a lot of other little ways to do that. Mr. Fantastic is a very popular card that always it's surprising how effective it can be just putting that 2 power in every lane. So definitely think these are the types of surprises you want to look at. But that doesn't mean if it wasn't in this list or it wasn't a type that those cards can't be considered surprise cards. Every card can be. It's just a lot of surprise cards can fall into these buckets of like this one does this one does that. So just something to think about when you're creating decks. Like, what is my surprise? What does it do? How does it work? What situations can I play with this to really take advantage of it? And once again, always consider snapping if you can utilize a surprise card effectively. Now, last section is telegraphed cards. So these are kind of the opposite of surprise cards. Just like there are cards that have a tendency to surprise a player, there are also cards that have a tendency to telegraph your plays. So I actually don't personally like these type of cards too much. The nice thing about these cards is usually they're very powerful, right? Like they don't get...
So is he going to talk about the stuff like Hawkeye, Jessica Jones, how is that bullshit called? Rescue. Cards that just say to the opponent where you are going to play. Maybe Dracula can be telegraphed because he's going to discard something on the last turn.
Get played unless they're powerful, unless they can win a lane, they can do a ton of unique mechanics. So they tend to be very strong. The only problem, at least for me, thinking about it from a climbing standpoint, is when you play these cards down, people tend to leave because they're so telegraphed. They're like, well, if he does this, I lose. So I'm not gonna test it. I'm just gonna leave. So you don't usually get 8 cubes.
Maybe Wong is one of those cards too.
From these type of cards, but they are still good. They have their uses, and they don't always have to be played in a telegraphed way, right? If you can manipulate the mana cost, or if you can play it earlier or later, blah blah blah, you can really turn these into surprise cards because you're playing them in an unusual way. But let's go through some of the examples I have here. So we have Storm, right? If I play Storm in an empty lane, what's being telegraphed, right? Maybe I'm about to play a Juggernaut or whatever, but it basically means I'm probably going to contest that lane, right? So it's telegraphing.
Yes, exactly.
And that can be pretty interesting.
But sometimes, and I have done this from time to time, it is not common, but I have done it to success, is that you play a Storm in a lane, and since they think that you are going to contest that lane, they are going to contest it too, but then you don't play there. You just give them the location and you just do something elsewhere, and of course that has to turn into your favor, but that is the surprise play, you know, since they are expecting you to do something and you don't do that. That is surprising, of course. And the Galactus, I was going to say that Galactus can be surprising if they don't expect it. Galactus is really telegraphed, but there are ways of playing a random Galactus that they don't expect. It is hard to pull off, but it can happen.
And how your opponents want to deal with that telegraphed nature of your play, right? Do they want to also contest? Do they want to ignore that lane? Do they want to bait a contest and then actually deal with it in a later date? Do they want to counter, change the location, blah, blah, blah? There's a lot of ways, but by playing the Storm, you're telegraphing you're about to do something on that lane most of the time, so you have to be careful with that. Wong's a notorious noob crusher, but the more you play, the more weaknesses you see with Wong, where people just say, oh, you play the Wong, well, I have a Cosmo. You play the Wong, I'm going to error. You play the Wong, well, I'm going to do another way to mess with the card. So it's just a card that telegraphs a place, and if things go wrong horribly, right? Like if they Cosmo your Wong, well, that can be the difference between you winning 8 cubes or you losing 8 cubes. So that's another scary thing about telegraph cards. If they know how to play around the telegraph nature of those cards, you can be baited into snapping, and then they can bait you into playing for 4 cubes, playing for 8 cubes, that kind of thing, and it can be really scary. Shuri, right? Even though Shuri is an amazing card, and I think the best card in the game, I still think it's telegraphed, because anytime you play a Shuri, what's coming afterwards? You know what's coming afterwards. A big boy, a big girl, something that's coming. That's going to be a big chunky. So you can do things like Shang-Chi preemptively, right? Like,
you even know what is coming after that, because after you play the big boy, now you want to copy that big boy. So when you play Shuri on 4, you already telegraph the 5th and the 6th turn, bro.
I know they're playing something that's Shang-Chi, but let me already just blow it up. Or I know they're going to be doing something with Zola or something with Taskmaster, so I need to prepare for that. So you just set up these telegraph windows whenever you play a Shuri. Even though Shuri is amazing, it's still a telegraph card. So even though cards can be super strong, it doesn't mean that they don't have weaknesses, they don't have ways to deal around it, they're not obvious to play with. So you just have to be careful. And then Galactus, right? So Galactus very, very telegraphed. If you play Galactus early, well, I guess you've lost, right? You may as well leave. Oh, Null's coming. Oh, they're Dr. Octopus, your whole hand, and now they Galactus you. I guess I should leave. Oh, they play the Wolverine. Oh, I wonder what's coming next, right? So the whole deck list is just telegraph card next to telegraph card next to telegraph card. Like they're screaming Galactus at you the whole time. So it's kind of interesting that the whole deck is basically a telegraphed deck list, but it's still really strong when it works, right? Like it's like even though you know what's coming, you might not be able to deal with it, and that just goes to show you like how powerful some of these telegraph cards can be, and if you just don't have decks that can really deal with that.
By the way, 2 of the examples he's talking about here were the examples that I talked to you earlier, that I said there are predictable decks that it doesn't matter they are predictable because they are still really good. And I talked specifically about the Shuri deck and the Galactus deck, and now he's talking about them. So there you go.
You don't Cosmo correctly or something like that, it can just
exactly, and even if they retreat, you still take the 1 extra cube, so at that point it doesn't matter if they retreat because you are still gaining something.
Be a bad or a non-fun experience, so you have to be careful with these things. But essentially that's all I got for you guys. Kind of a full breakdown of surprise cards, a full breakdown of what they do, why you should have them, the types, and just fully understanding why these are an important part of the metagame. So hopefully you learned something, hopefully you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.
Oh brother, we enjoyed it for sure. This is a cool informative video to think deeper into the how do you win games in Marvel Snap, and it is a nuanced topic because, as we said, yes, having the surprise factor is really important in a game that it feels like betting, with the snack mechanic like poker and the flop and revealing your big play. But at the same time, you have the Shuri deck and the Galactus deck that you know what they are doing and they still can beat you, brother. So it is a nuanced topic, but of course, having surprising cards is really good, as we discussed in this video. Thank you, EducatedCollins, for another great video, my brother. This is the second video we watched from him, and it was another cool video, brother. Thank you very much.